Your whole creation declares your glory. We pray that as we study your word today, that we may be led to see that you created all things in 6 days, just as the Bible says. Grant us a richer measure of your Spirit, that we would grow in our understanding, and that we would be more certain that you are our Savior God. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so this was the slide we were on. Here's I think this is a replica. I don't know if it's the real thing or not. But in verse 14, so Job 41 verse 14 says, "Who dares open the doors to his mouth, which is surrounded with terrifying teeth?" So it's been estimated that Super Croc's bite was twice as strong as T-Rex. If ever you've seen an exhibition on a crocodile, they have tremendous strength to close their mouth. They don't have tremendous strength to open their mouth. You can actually just get electrical tape. If the mouth is closed, wrap it around, and they don't have a lot of strength. But this is, with a jaw like that, you can imagine the force with which it can close, and then the teeth all around. We see the same thing here on the skeleton. So then this, to me, is one of the fascinating aspects of Super Croc. So he has rows of shield on his backs. So body armor, I think it's called scoots, and that's this here. Notice what it says in verse 15. His back is like rows of shield, which are tightly joined together. They are so close together, not even a breath of air can pass between them. They are fastened to each other, so they stick together and cannot be separated. So this, you can see these rows of shields, and the next one is closer. But here, the shields actually overlap. So those bones down the back actually overlap all the way down the back. And to me, this is fascinating because until this skeleton was found, we didn't have any creature like this that we could refer to. And here they find an almost full-size skeleton of a super croc in the Sahara Desert. And right down the back are all these rows of shields. So no other creature passed. His shields are so tightly together, no weapon could penetrate them. And that's one of the aspects. Here, not verse 7, but point 7, fire-breathing metaphors are used to describe his ferocity. So his snorts are flashes of light. His eyes like the eyelids of dawn. Blazing torches come out of his mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Psalm 18 verse 8 describes God in his anger as fire breathing. And so fire breathing can be a metaphor to show his ferocity, in that psalm it was God's anger. We shouldn't be surprised because in the behemoth, in that section we looked at, said he had legs like bronze, or legs of bronze. So okay, it's metaphorically explaining his strength, so forth. So some want to look at this section and just say, oh, Leviathan is a mythical creature, because we don't have any evidence of fire breathing anything. And they want to rule it out without giving the possibility that it's metaphorical instead. Next one. So his neck is strong, firm, and immovable. Crocodilians can lock the vertebrae in their neck during the death roll. So 22, the strength dwells in his neck. Despair dances ahead of him. The folds of his flesh are compact, solid, immovable. So this aspect that his neck is strong. The death, sorry, there's a typo. Should be different, the other typo wrong. Okay? Leviathan means twisting one. And crocodiles, even when this crocodile in the park is grabbing this meat, notice he's rolling over, he goes into a death roll. And here again, another one. This is how they function. When they grab something, they immediately start twisting, and they'll pull back and get it underwater and twist it, and they're just trying to drown the animal. So in Australia, the crocodiles have an incredible sense of time. If ever you're camping where there are crocodiles, you should never get into a regular pattern of behavior, because they will be waiting for you. So cows are very regular. Cows always go to drink at dawn and at dusk. And they sometimes during the day, it depends how hot it is, so forth. But the crocodile will just be waiting under the water, right in the shallows. Cow comes down, sticks its nose in the water, crocodile grabs it. First of all, it pulls it in, and then it just starts turning. And it'll keep turning until the cow stops fighting. Okay? So they lock their neck to be able to do that. They lock their neck, and then with their tail they can just turn. So it is interesting that Leviathan means twisting one. 10, his chest is hard and protected. So his underbelly is like sharp pieces of broken pottery. It leaves marks in the mud like a threshing sledge. So, I thought I had pictures. Yep, it's coming up. Okay. So no weapons of his time could harm or kill it. 25, he rises up, the mighty are afraid. He thrashes around, they retreat. If someone strikes him with a sword, it has no effect. Neither do spears, arrows, or javelins. To him iron is like straw, bronze is like rotten wood. Arrows do not make him flee. To him sling stones are like chaff, clubs are like stubble. He laughs at the shaking of a javelin, just his, or man's inability to be able to hurt him. Okay, so then he is at home on land or in the water. Alligator tracks are pictured here. So his underbelly is like sharp pottery, pieces of pottery. It leaves marks in the mud like a threshing sledge. This cannot be a sea creature, because that's one of the other, or maybe it's a sea creature, a massive shark or something like that. Okay? Well, no, it leaves tracks. And a sledge has no wheels, it's dragged on the ground, so it leaves this dragging case. Okay? So big crocodile leaves big marks in the mud. Then makes the waters churn, he makes the depths boil like a cooking pot, he makes the sea like a cauldron of ointment. More characteristics. So it leaves a wake like a boat, he leaves a shiny wake behind him. So there you can just see going on top with the wake. This is the most awesome creature known to man, land-dwelling. There is nothing at all like him on earth, a creature without fear. He is thought to have eaten dinosaurs for lunch, so to speak. He is not afraid of anything, a creature without fear. Even T-Rex was no match for him, if by chance they inhabited the same space. He makes every person and creature look puny in comparison. He looks down on everything that is lofty. He is king over every proud creature. Okay? So this is, look at this. So you got kids standing here, and here's the crocodile. I mean, that's a massive beast. So imperator means king. He looks down on everything that is lofty. He is king over every proud creature. So Job 41 is a perfect description of Supercroc. It doesn't come close to any other creature, past or present. Notice the incredible detail. Okay? And again, I would point to that row of shields. To me, that's really the thing that seals it. We don't see that in anything else, and yet there they are, all the way down its back. Just like Job said. Okay? Now that also means that Job is familiar with the anatomy of supercroc. That God would use that to show Job how powerful God is and how small, so to speak, Job is. So again, the idea of the geologic column is that men and dinosaurs are separated by almost 65 million years. Okay, well, how is it possible that Job knows supercroc? If you agree that it seems to be pointing that way. Obviously, they're living in the same time period. So, the next section is on the Ken Ham and Bill Nye debate. So, I'm trying to remember the exact year now. Bill Nye, the science guy, and Ken Ham debated. And you can go on YouTube, you can find the whole debate. Okay? There are some key things that we're going to focus on in that. If you want to watch the debate, I'm sure we won't get through all this today. You certainly can. You don't need to, but it will provide background information. So what we want to do is look at 3 of Ken Ham's chief pieces of evidence that he said supposedly show that I flipped them around. Bill Nye's 3 chief pieces of evidence that supposedly show that Ken Ham's model of creation is wrong. Okay? So why did I choose this debate? Well, it's well publicized, and Bill Nye was a very strong spokesman for evolutionism, still is today. And you would think then, if he's going to research for a national televised debate, that he would choose the strongest pieces of evidence that would support evolution. So what are the... Okay. So if you look at the debate, Ken Ham opens because he's on the affirmative. And he makes a distinction between observable science and historical science. And his line of reasoning is there are certain things that we can't observe. And he calls that historic or historical science. And he distinguishes that from the stuff that we can observe today. I'm critical of his dichotomy. I think that is a very, it's a weak dichotomy. And Bill Nye, I won't say ridicules him, but debates him on the fact that no one else makes this distinction. This is unique to Ken Ham, historical. Okay? I would say a better distinction is between observable science and theoretical explanation. Okay? So, for instance, you can find a skeleton, the supercroc. Okay? That's observable, right? There's a skeleton. That animal must have lived. That's observable. Okay? But then to try and explain it, you can come up with a lot of theories about how that animal existed, where it existed, when it existed, all of those things. Okay? Those things aren't observable. Okay? How did it die? All of those things. Okay? And that's where it's more theoretical. And there certainly are parts of science that are observable, and we can make some pretty good guesses about the other parts of it, sometimes better than others. So this would have strengthened Ham's point that everyone has the same evidence. The difference of opinion is in the explanation of the evidence. And this was a key point that Ham made, that we all have the same evidence, because you got the fossils, you got the skeletons, you got the rock layers, you got petrified wood, everyone's got the same evidence. It's not that evolutionists are using different evidence than the creationists, or vice versa. Same evidence. The difference is in the explanation. How did it get there? Or how was it created? So Ham reasons that the creation model is a viable model because historical science, evolution, which contradicts the creation model, was not observed and therefore is invalid. Okay? So that's his basic line. That's in the past, you can't observe it, therefore it's not valid. Okay? Again, I would say it's a weak dichotomy, because there are things that we can put pieces together and make very good guesses about what happened in the past, using evidence, so forth. Anyway, so Bill Nye's chief argument is that the evidence does not support the biblical timeline. That was Nye's chief thing, timeline. Okay? And he kept going back to the flood happened 4,000 years ago, and there's not enough time from there to where we are today. So let's look at it. So here are the three major pieces of evidence. So ice cores. The evidence is that there are 680,000 layers in the ice. Okay? We're going to talk about each of these in detail. Then Old Tico is a tree supposedly said to be 9,550 years, 9,550 years old. Okay? Fossil record. So life forms don't swim between the layers. And we'll talk about that more. So these are the three chief pieces of evidence that Bill Nye uses. And we want to spend some time. So ice cores. Ham mentioned Glacier Girl in the debate, but he didn't go into it. Okay, so now we are. So Glacier Girl crash landed on Greenland on July 15th, 1942. We know the exact day that it went down, the squadron went down. Okay? It was discovered in 1992, I should say rediscovered in 1992. And that's after two other failed expeditions. It was found in 268 feet of ice. The reason the other two expeditions did not find her was they were looking in about 40 feet of ice. They were told that the maximum depth the plane would be at 40 feet. Okay? She was actually found at 268 feet in depth. So we know the exact time she was in the ice, or at least from when she crash landed to when she was found. So what is the rate of ice accumulation? Well, if you take 268 and divide it by 50, you end up with 5.36 feet per year. Okay? So the ice on Greenland in this 50-year period grew at 5.36 feet per year. Okay? So the ice cap on Greenland is about a mile thick. At that rate, how long would it take for a ice cap a mile thick to form? Well, if you take 5,280, I'm still getting used to miles and feet, okay, and you divide it by 5.36, you end up with 985 years. The current accepted theory is that those 680,000 layers represent 680,000 years. That each ring in the ice core, okay? Maybe I should. You understand what I mean by ice core, right? They do this the same in rock, but they have a drill that's like a donut. and it drills down over cutting a hole around a core, and then when the core tube fills up, it's broken, then you pull the drill up, and you get the core out, and you lay it in a tray, and then you put it down again, and go and go. I spent 6 weeks working with a diamond driller underground, not with ice, but with rock, doing exactly the same thing. Okay? You lay it out and then you analyze the core. So they've got this ice core and they've counted up 680,000 layers. And they propose that each one of those layers is a year. And so therefore that ice cap is 680,000 years old. Well, here we have data that says at our known rates of ice accumulation, that ice cap is only 1,000 years old. And so what must, obviously, those layers aren't yearly layers. They're in some ways they're treating it like rings in a tree, counting the rings. Yes, Eric.
You're using a couple different units. How many layers deep was this person found at? Because number of feet doesn't coordinate to any number of layers as far as we know just yet.
Yeah, and I don't know how many layers she was found down, but what I can say is that the best scientists were saying she would be 40 feet down at most. So from their data of layers, they were saying at most she's going to be 40 feet down. Okay. So are you saying like the thickness of layers?
40 feet down is only 15 layers. Then, okay. You know, like just devil's argument, or devil's advocate to some degree. If 40 feet down is only 15 layers, kind of layer or something, then that doesn't. Right? So I'm just saying number of feet and number of layers. It's not. I don't know what the direct comparison is.
Yeah, and I don't know either. That's something I haven't looked into. Okay? All I can say is they were saying 40 feet down. And so whatever their data was, they were saying 40 feet. And it's not what it turned out to be. Okay? And regardless of how many layers per inch or feet there are in that top part, the reality is we see that the ice accumulation is, orders of magnitude faster than what was being suggested. And so what it's now being proposed is that those layers in the rings in the ice core aren't yearly events like a summer and a winter, but they can be created multiple times whenever there's a freeze and a thaw, or a thaw and a freeze. So you can get multiple layers in the core just from a warm day, cold night, warm day, cold night. And it reminded me when I was up at walking on a lake, and there was layers of water between layers of ice. And, if that was eventually compressed and then frozen, you would get multiple layers in that, and it was only one season. So, if we work with this 1,000-year period, first of all, it shows that Bill Nye's proposition that the ice cores prove that the Bible account is not true. Well, wait a minute. 1,000 years. We can certainly fit that in the biblical timeline. Okay? But here's what else we know. So Greenland had 2 Norwegian agricultural colonies before 1200 AD. Okay? Greenland was Greenland for a reason. It was called Greenland because it was green. And in fact, the colonies there were big enough that there was actually a bishop assigned to Greenland, had a cathedral. Around 1200 AD, the weather changed and the agricultural colonies eventually failed. So there was a change in weather and the ice started accumulating. Eventually, even the fishing outposts failed. So we know this from recorded history. There was a weather change and now it is accumulating ice. And the point is, 1200 is about how many years ago? About 1,000. So we know that the climate at Greenland changed about 1,000 years ago. Perfect alignment with the rate of accumulation that was seen from 1942 to 1990. So there's that. Then we also have ancient maps. Okay? So Orontius Phineas, his map is 1531. Phineas used other maps to draw his, and I'll have a picture of it up there soon. Okay? And extremely good at geometry. He calculated pi to be 3.1410. Extremely accurate, well-respected scholar. So he's a known scholar, well-respected. The map is established as authentic. So this map is from 1531. Then Pyri Reis is 1513. Pyri said that he used maps dating back to Alexander the Great to write his map is established as authentic. Again, these maps aren't questioned with regards to their authenticity. Historically accepted. This is Orontius Phineas. This is Antarctica. So notice the map, the detail of the map. You've got extremely complex geometry and geography. This map is surprising because even with our modern satellite pictures, it is shown to be very accurate. And that's Antarctica without ice. That's amazing. Map from 1531 showing Antarctica without ice. Now, he was saying, I'm using other maps, I'm copying ancient sources. But that shows us that they must have been sailing down there when Antarctica didn't have ice. They may have been good at cartography. Yep, cartography. Okay. But we don't think they had satellites. And that map is shown to be extremely accurate, even with the best technology we have today. So, how did they do that? The only logical conclusion is it didn't have ice on it, and they were sailing around it. Similarly, Pyri Reis. This isn't as clear, but here's the South Pole, I think it is. You can see the bottom of Africa somewhere. I think it's this point here. It's not as clear as the Orontius Phineas one, but it's still an ancient map that shows these places without ice. Because if you overlay this with what we know of the land mass of Antarctica today, this is the land mass, not the ice mass. So Antarctica today is much larger, and it's connected, it's all just covered in ice. Okay? But this is the land mass. And even these rivers and so forth that it shows, these estuaries, right on. You know, and they're covered in ice today. If you were to sail to Antarctica today, you wouldn't really know that was there. Yes, Rachel.
So would there be a lot of lost civilizations from?
Sorry.
Would there be a lot of lost civilizations then?
I suppose so. When they're drilling the ice cores in Antarctica, they do drill through wood. So that it was obviously at some point a lush place. Same with Siberia. We can see that there's been a dramatic change in climate there. So the whole idea that, Columbus' whole idea that we're told, everyone thought the world was flat and only Columbus thought it was round, and so that's just not true. Here you have the world being drawn as a sphere. And it was actually in a play about Columbus that thought that everyone thought the world was flat. That's where that idea comes from, not from history. Sailors have known for a long time. The Phoenicians were incredible sailors, sailing all over the world. There's evidence that they were coming to the United States well before Columbus. So there's that. So this is just in proof that the ice cap on Greenland isn't 680,000 years old. Because for whatever reason, about 1,000 years ago, it seems that the climate changed and became cool. So these maps show us that man was sailing much more of the world than we realize. The cartographers of the past were extremely accurate and had a deep understanding of mathematics. Antarctica was largely ice-free. So there we go. Is that how are we doing time-wise? 2:03. So I've got 12 minutes. Okay. We may get through this. Oltico. The age was determined by carbon dating subsurface materials. So, Oltico is a Norwegian pine, I believe. And they took roots, carbon dated it, and said it was 9,550 years old. And so Bill Nye is saying that's proof that the Bible is wrong because supposedly a flood happened 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. That tree couldn't be 9,000 years old if it was. Okay, it was proposed that the tree trunk would die, but then a new trunk would grow, because the tree trunk on Oltico is only about 600 years old. That's accepted. But supposedly some of the roots dated at 9,550 years old. So the current tree is estimated 600. Clearly, this does not contradict the biblical timeline. First of all, you can't do carbon dating on living matter. So if they're going to carbon date roots, are they suggesting that those roots were preserved in the soil for 9,500 years while you've got a living tree above it breaking down everything? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The only thing they can prove is the tree is about 600 years old. So that one doesn't really hold any water. Okay, so fossil record. Ken Ham's evidence. So in the debate, Ken Ham cited that, I believe it was in Australia, they were drilling through basalt and they drilled through wood. And the wood was carbon dated at 45,000 years old. But the basalt was dated at 45 million years old. So how do you get wood that is 45,000 years old encapsulated in basalt that is 45 million years old? And in the debate, Bill Nye said something about, well, maybe the basalt slid over the top of the wood. No, it was encapsulated. Basalt is a volcanic rock. How do you get wood that is supposedly 45,000 years old in 45 million year old basalt? And Ken Ham's point in raising this evidence was that your dating systems are all wrong or inaccurate. It's impossible to have 45,000-year-old in 45-million-year-old basalt. Okay? And he wasn't after an explanation, he was just showing. And the basalt has been dated a number of different ways, and every time you date it, each different thing comes up with a different age for it. So when we hear about carbon dating and radioactive dating, that type of thing, it's maybe not as accurate as they would like us to believe. Let's keep going. Okay, so let's look at the idea of fossils swimming up. So what type of rock are fossils, in what type of rock are fossils found? Are they found in volcanic rocks? Abby? Sedimentary. Okay. Fossils are found in sedimentary rocks. So you have igneous volcanic rocks, you have sedimentary rocks, and then you have metamorphic rocks. Okay? Metamorphic rocks are rocks that have undergone change. They can be any type of rock. So it could be an igneous rock or a sedimentary rock that has undergone some change due to temperature and pressure, so forth. Okay? Fossils are found in sedimentary rocks. And there's a number of reasons for that. So what type of environment is needed to form sedimentary rocks? Often it's water. Sediment falls out of water. Now, you can get sedimentary rocks forming in deserts. So where sand is, where the sediment falls out of the air, not out of water. Most of the time, they're formed in water. So, why do we have such a plethora of fossils available? And I just want to make sure I'm on the right. Okay, so we have, let's say, billions of fossils. Why? That's a big question. Why? You know, with our lakes in Minnesota, how many fossils are being made? Very few. Because the ecology is so efficient, just about everything that dies gets eaten up. And yet we have massive sedimentary deposits that contain billions of fossils. That points to a cataclysmic event. And just recently I I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to do that yet. So we've got all these fossils because there must have been a cataclysmic event that caused the animals to die and be covered in sediment very quickly. We know the conditions needed to create fossilization. Fossilization requires there to be no oxygen. If there's oxygen, the animal will break down. It requires pressure, but then water, because the minerals from the water replace the bones and the tissue in the animal itself. And that's what's preserved. So we know the conditions necessary to create fossils. Petrified wood, same thing. So you've got to have massive amounts of sediment falling out, locking these animals away so that they can be preserved, so forth. And we've got such concentrations. Okay, so let's for a moment assume that the Great Flood really happened. Okay? So this is taking it from a different direction. Let's assume that the flood did happen. What would we expect to see in geology? We would expect massive concentrations of fossils, massive sedimentary structures. Okay? Just recently, I stumbled onto, I think it's called the Cocachino. I think that's how you pronounce it. Or Cocacino. Sedimentary body. It starts at the Grand Canyon. It goes almost all the way to the east coast. It is 200,000 square miles. Now, the interesting thing about this sandstone is that its layers are almost perfectly flat across the whole thing. And it's huge, it's massive. So it's very, very deep, very, very big. Okay? Flat, that means it must have been the same body of water at one point, that it would all be deposited. And we know that it wasn't deposited over thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, because there are no erosion patterns, or at least very few erosion patterns between the different layers. So when a layer gets dropped, sediment, if there's a great period of time before the next layer is dropped, you're going to see levels that are chewed out because there was a creek or a river running through it, and there'll be other deposits mixed in there if you've got it. But these perfectly flat sandstone layers across this huge, vast area, okay, it must have been dropped very, very quickly, layer upon layer upon layer. Okay? And in the flood, we would have the perfect conditions for a body like that to be created. World is covered in water. Okay? One of the things that we don't, and I know I'm running up on time. Okay, I've got 2 minutes. One of the things we often don't take into account when we think of the flood, we think of all the water surrounded the earth, okay, and how deep it was and everything like that. All that is true. The thing that we disregard is the effect of the moon. The moon going around the earth controls the water of the earth. The stronger the moon, so that the full moon creates the biggest tides. The king tides are always on the full moon because it has its strongest pull at that point. So if you think of the earth covered with water and then the moon going around it and its gravitational pull on the water, you would have a real churning going on there in a 24-hour period. So not only the water bursting forth from the deep and the rain falling, but then this moon, we can only guess at the effect that would have had on the body of water. So there would have been lots of stirring up, creating plenty of opportunity for layer upon layer of sediment to be settling out. Okay, and I think that's where I think I'm going to have to stop right there. So we'll pick it up here. And the next part is why the animals don't swim between the layers. That's what we'll cover now. Yes?
I can't help but think, you started out on this Bill Nye Cunningham debate by saying that Cunningham himself was saying that there should be no dispute about the observable evidence. It's a matter of how you're explaining these things. And I see a great parallel, I don't know if others do too, but with the way the Lord said he spoke in parables. And it does say in Matthew 13, for example, a number of parables.
fools.
Confounded in it all the more. That's a scriptural teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to explain, you know, when it comes to theology or the study of God and so on,
Mm-hmm.
in the whole area of good and evil. But at the same time, yeah, I see that there's a lot of truth in this, and it's definitely told us about terrible stuff, for example.
Yep.
And of course, God can never be a truth.
Evil. Yeah. Very good. Well, let's close with the singing of the doxology.
Praise God.